Pero en caso de la
Hello. Sir, we can't hear you if you're talking.
Sir, your voice is not audible.
You hear me now? No, obvious.
Yes, yes.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Okay, so
Again, we miss you, sir.
So now we cannot hear you.
Yeah.
This is not audible.
how many people does your manager manage? So how many people do you? Okay, thank you. Hello, can you hear me now?
Now, yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, hopefully we shouldn't have a problem. Okay. Yeah, so we'll. What happened? So you're basically looking at uh, how many people can a manager manage? We're talking span of control. So how many people do you think a manager can manage? So it used to be in the when there were factories, there was a gentleman called Fayol who said 7 was the maximum. But as technology came in, it was found that you could manage much larger number of people. So I think 20 is now the norm. Though I do know managers who manage as much as 35 or 40. Okay, and somebody here is from construction, right? In construction, they're managing maybe 200 or 300 people. So it depends on the dynamics. It depends on how much that person can do without direct supervision. Depends on a lot of factors. But the one important thing is there, and how much of autonomy do people have to take decisions, which is the power that is shared with people down the line. Okay, so uh, the more power you give down the line, the faster is the decision making. So people who are on the field can take a decision on the field depending on what the situation is. And if you make power only at the center, the decision making is slow and is often wrong, because it is based on the perceptions of the big man, and that perceptions could be totally wrong. So which is why you find, uh, if you went to any public sector, this is how it would work, that the power is only at the top. Okay, so I went to meet the chief general manager of SBI, which is a senior position in SBI, and found him signing at 10 o'clock in the morning. He was signing leave applications. He is 4 levels above a branch manager. But a branch manager cannot even sanction leave. He can recommend it, and his boss will recommend it and recommend it and recommend it, and it reaches. Is that the best way of time? Is that is what he should be doing? But no, only he has a power. And if it is more than 15 days, it goes to AGM. Now you know why SBI is not a great bank. This is how they spend their time. So you turn these people into paper pushers, because he has a huge bunch of papers that's lying there, and he needs to sign them off, which this can be done by the branch manager. He should be doing it. He should be taking a call whether this person should go on leave or should not go on leave. In organizations which are which are better, for example, have you heard of a company based in Bangalore called ABB, Asia Brown Boveri, or even Biocon? Really delegated power. The person who's doing the job has full powers. They can go and decide, and of course, if it doesn't work, that person takes the blame, but also takes the credit. But what happens is that people who know what that job is will do a much better job, and there is no value add by just pushing it upstairs and saying, okay, you take a decision. There's no value add. So this person can take a decision, and they go ahead and they do a good job about it. So it really is about how much of power that you have. So um, all of you feel you have power, you can take a decision. How does your company work? Okay. Oh, you can. Okay. Okay, so you can go tell your boss, you know, this is what I want, and it happens. Okay, but what about you? How is it in a startup? Yeah. Okay, but since you have a pan India structure, then how does it work? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so that's how it should be. You know, that's typically how a company. But what about you? Where do you work? Amazon. Okay. Okay, so these are companies where you have Wipro. Are you in the regular projects and in development and in non-IT? Okay, so fine. So how does it work in non-IT? There is a department and there is okay. So different companies have different powers that they give out to people, but most companies have realized it is better to give to the man who has his eyes and ears on the ground, so he knows what the ground reality is, and this person should take the decision. For example, there is a lorry strike, or there is a problem in getting lorries. You know, if you have to kick it upstairs, it's going to take 3 days before you can take a decision. The person there has to take a decision. You want to pay more? What is it you want to do? You want to sweet talk some trucker into moving? That has to be done by that person. You can't have somebody coming. You can't have a committee sitting and taking a decision. And remember that a committee decided to give Vijay Mallya 6,000 crores. So committees don't take always the right decision. And and yeah, I used to work for that company, you know, IDBI, and you know, my big bosses when I was working went to jail. So, I do know somebody who went to jail, just jokes apart. So, um, how many, what happens is when you're 4 or 5 people, it's easy for the manager to lay down rules and to run it by his whims and fancies. My company, I can run it any way I want. If I want you to only wear white shirts, then I'll tell you that is it, and that's my rule. That's it. As you become bigger and bigger, what happens is that you have to ensure common rules across the length and breadth of the company. So you can't expect each team to come up with its own rules. Then you'll have chaos. So it becomes more and more rigid as you become bigger. As you become bigger, so when you're a small company, you can dress any way you want. Nobody bothers. As you become bigger, there are restrictions put on you that you can't do this and you can't do that because there has to be common rules. And then how do people from different departments, how do they interact? Do they need to interact? How do they interact? That is the next point that you do in when you're talking about. Now, how much of the work is specialized? Okay, so what used to happen is in the good old days, there used to be people who specialized in certain things, but now a lot of work has been non-specialized. For example, in IT, if you work in a company like Infosys or TCS Wipro, you might be working on a bank project one day and you might be moved after 6 months to healthcare domain. Third, you can go to retail space because the skills are not something that you can't understand, and the skills you have is enough for you to work and do that job. So jobs have become more or less homogeneous. People get moved from one place to another place. Okay, is that how it is in your companies too? Most departments, would there be inter movement between the departments, or if you're in one department, that's how? Okay, so it depends on the company because in manufacturing, maybe it is not always possible. Okay, so you can have some movement, but not too much. You need specialized people. Lot of companies, they allows for such movements happening. Now, work specialization. What happened in work specialization is that uh, you ensure people are specialized. Uh, have you heard of Henry Ford? Now, Henry Ford, who started the motor company, was the first man who said, yeah, come. So, what did Henry Ford say? He said that I'm going to break up making a car into a number of very simple steps that anybody can do. So, what is one step? You need to lift one tire and fix it to the car. Anybody can do this. The next step is fixing 4 bolts to that wheel. And the third job is to tighten that. So he said, I am going to make this job so simple that I don't need specialized people. You have very few specialized people. Now, all the specialized people, unfortunately, anybody from the auto industry? No. Okay, so a lot of specialized jobs that used to exist in the auto companies have now been automated and taken over by robots. One of the specialized jobs that used to exist in an auto company used to be painting. Painting was a specialized job. Now you have robots doing it and doing a much better job. So uh, even those specialized jobs have now been automated. So virtually the job can be done by anyone. So what is a problem? What do you think is a problem when you have too much of specialization? When you divide your job like that, anybody, BPOs try to do this. If you're working for a BPO, or a KPO like this, some of them call themselves, where you are doing work for others, you try to break it down into easy things so that it becomes easier for people to do it. So your job is to take out 4 reports, make and take 4 reports in a day. That's all. So you come in the morning, ensure those 4 reports are done by the evening, and your job is done. That's it. You don't have to worry about How is the data coming? Is that data right? That is somebody else's job. Okay, so I did a training program for IBM, and they told me that you give your invoice, it is going to be scanned here, it's going to be processed in some other part of the world, and the entries are going to be made in Argentina, and the check is going to get printed out in the instructions to pay is going to come from China, and then you're going to get paid. So don't ever ask us where your bill is. So you're going to get paid. Even I don't know where your bill is because I don't have any contacts in China. So you could have that amount of specialization. You could. So what do you think is the problem that happens with too much of work specialization? What do you think happens with the people who have jobs in your company, like say security, housekeeping? What do you think happens to them? The problem that they have. But more than that, don't you think it's boring? So boredom sets in, and therefore you have to do other things to keep them motivated. But that's one of the problems that you have. Now, as you start making it specialized, to some extent, you get higher productivity. Okay, so what happens is that um, one minute. So if you're looking at economies of scale, to some extent, the more the work, the specialization, to some extent you have higher uh, the productivity goes up, and then due to boredom, then due to lack of growth, if my job is to lift a tire and I'm going to fix it, that's my job. How are you going to promote this person? What is going to be promotion for that person? So you have a number of low skilled people who don't see growth, and therefore you have a problem. Okay, yeah. Have I told you about the Toyota way, about Toyota getting over this? What Toyota did is that this is how cars are manufactured, scooters are manufactured. The auto industry works this way: that there's an assembly line, and you have a number of very not very highly skilled jobs. So what Toyota did is they said that this is not the way to do it. So instead of doing it, they broke the assembly line into smaller groups, and these were self-contained groups. So instead of having one big assembly line, they made smaller teams. And what happened is that whoever is there, whoever is making a car, there is a small chip that is there in every Toyota car, which tells you who made the car. So what happened is, from me fixing a car, now my name is going on every car. You can say it's a very symbolic thing, but it made a lot of difference. It brought in pride. And in this group, you can change jobs. You can say, I'm bored of doing that. My friend, why don't you allow me to fix seats? So you will have somebody, okay, they're saying, okay, fine, I will fix tires today. So there could be changes. And the group was such that you have to do multiple tasks. You can't do only one task. So when the car comes, I'll fix the wheel, then go fix the steering wheel, and then probably put in some other component. So there are multiple tasks that I have to do. So they got over this work specialization in by coming up with self thing, but they're the only people who could do that. So now, as okay, so now how do you ensure departments? What are the good ways of doing departments? By function. Simple way of doing it: you have sales, you have production, you have finance, and you have HR department wise. So it becomes very easy for you to do it. But as you grow bigger, you might be in other locations too. Then what do you do? So what you do is you have branches, and I mean, by geography territory, you come up with geography. You could also have product and service. If there are many different types of customers, and each customer is very different, then you have to come up with, for example, suppose you're in the food industry. Suppose you're in Nestle selling Maggie noodles. They have two different outlets. One is that they sell directly to the customer. So whenever you want a Maggie noodle, you go buy it. But they also sell to bulk customers. It could be an institution like this. It could be a hotel. So the dynamics of purchase in Dayanand Sagar University is going to be very different from an individual purchasing. Because Dayanand Sagar will say, give me a quotation, they'll compare it with other noodle makers. There is a process for that. So you have different sales people dealing with these different things. So depending on what type of customers you have. So for example, if you went to a bank, okay, so if you went to a bank, people like you and me are called retail banking. So you have retail banking. Then what happens is that if you are a big investor, you get a personal bank. You could have a small set, I'm sorry, they're called private banking, where you have a small set of customers being dealt by one relationship manager so that they can give you more personalized attention, but more importantly, they also can give you personalized advice to ensure how you manage your money. And if you become really big, like if you become Nandan Nelikani, then you get a personal banker whose only job from morning to evening, 8 hours a day, 365 days, is to manage your money, and or rather to help you manage your money. Why? Because one Nandan Nelikani can give the bank much more profit than about 1,000 of us. So there are some people who manage us, and there are some people who only manage one person. So it depends on how much, what is the dynamics of that. That is one thing. Process difference, type of customers. These are some of the other things. Now, when you're looking at the chain of command, you're talking about, basically you're talking about, is there one person who is in charge? Are you sure who is in charge? Or we are not really sure who is taking the decisions. So every structure has to ensure unity of command. That finally the buck has to stop at one person's door, and that person is responsible for the success or failure of everything that happens in the company. So which is why, yeah, come. So which is why if something goes wrong, it is the managing director who is arrested, because he is responsible for it. For example, if there is a fire, then obviously he is not the person who installs fire safety equipment. He's not the person who's going to man it, but he's responsible for it. So he's going to the first person who's going to get arrested. Okay, so now authority, who has the authority to do what? That is the next thing. Now, this we talked about span of control. When you have more people, the span of control is each manager is managing more people. Then you have flatter organization. The organization structure is flatter. Flatter organizations have better information flow. Decisions are faster. All organizations now try to make the organization structure very flat. Okay, so you have flat organization structure. Remember that HR sometimes create artificial layers, but the flat organization, remember. So I need to promote people every 2 years. So what do? I create artificial layers. I call them software engineer, senior software engineer, and whatever, very senior software engineer, so that for 6 years I can keep promoting this person without adding to this person's job. Because my organization structure is very flat, I can't really promote this person. It'll take me 6 to 8 years, but this person will leave if this person is not promoted. So I create artificial layers. These are artificial layers. They're virtual layers. Nothing happens. The organization still remains very flat because there is no difference in the work. Does that happen in your company? So that is an HR ploy to keep employees happy. So what you do is you keep promoting people, but without adding too much to their role or responsibility. Okay, so this is a compulsion because people expected promotion very quickly, so they were forced to do that. Now, how much of your organization is centralized, decentralized? We talked about it. How much are your organization have a formal rules that is implemented in the length and breadth of the company? All your companies have an HR manual or an organization manual that you have, which is a code of conduct. So how much is that? How much is that followed? Is it followed very rigidly, or is there some leeway for employees to work? They don't really trouble you too much, as long as it's a reasonable thing that you're doing. It's rigid. Okay. What about some of your companies, other companies? In Wipro, I know it is rigidly followed. Okay, not very strict. So it depends on how much you want to, but everybody has a rule. Okay, and the same rule is followed. So anybody here has worked for Accenture? So in Accenture, you could have funny rules because they have global practices. Now in Accenture, you can't wear white socks. I'm not joking. Serious rule. It is told during induction that you can't wear white socks. Why? In Ireland, white socks are a sign of protest. So if you are protesting, you don't like your manager, all of you wear white socks, then the manager knows you don't like him or you don't like his or her action. So it's very easy to go to strike in Ireland. You know, Ireland, all you have to do is white socks. But it is banned in the rest of the world because you might be dealing with an Irish team and they might misunderstand you and saying, okay, there are 4 of you wearing white socks. They say, oh, these guys are on strike. So you need to therefore find ridiculous practices that come in when you have a global company and you're coming up with global practices which are standard. It becomes very, very difficult for you to actually come up with global practices which are standard. Now, or if you work for a Japanese company says when you're going out and representing your company, it could be that I'm going and meeting somebody, as a member of the company, you have to wear a suit. It doesn't matter if you're in Chennai or in Hyderabad where the weather is 45 degrees, you still wear a suit. Because that's how it is. You always wear a suit. So that is how the structure is. So you could, as you become very big and really big, you could have all these very rigid rules put into place. Okay. So the other rule, and I'm telling you serious rules in Accenture, strictly follow. Now in Accenture, you can wear a coat, but not a tie. Because only very senior people in the organization wear a coat and a tie. Serious rules. I'm telling you, written in stone. So you could, why is it? Because they're too big. So you need to have rigid rules put in saying that you must do this. Okay, you are a junior guy, you are wearing tie, remove it. Because you have not yet come to the level where you can wear a tie. Oh, you have now been promoted, tomorrow you can wear a tie. So you can wear a tie or a coat, but not both. That's a rule. So you could have, I don't blame the company. I'm not, for instance, saying that this is wrong. Because when you have a company which is very big, spread across the globe, you need to ensure that all global, what are the rigidities that exist in everything are all incorporated. It becomes a very rigid structure. So this is what happens when you have a highly formal. How do other departments interact? Is it informal or is it formal? So in a company which is informal, you just go across, talk to the other person and get the job done. Or is it a very formal thing that you raise a request and you send an email and somebody has to approve it? Is that how it is? That is what. So we'll look at the structure. So we'll spend some time looking at structure. So this is a simple structure. You have one manager and this is how companies start off. When you have a startup, you will have three people. They will say, let's come up with a new company and we have a great idea and they'll start a company. So there are three people, they're all doing everything. And then they recruit a person. So they say this person is a cashier. Your job is to go to the bank and to ensure all bill payments are made and salaries are paid. That's your job. You're done. Now then you say, we have salespeople. Okay, so I ask the salesperson, this is your job, go and sell. Simple structure, no problem. Now, as what happens is, you can't have this when you have 50 people. Then there's chaos. Then what happens is that you will come to bureaucracy after a time. We look at the functional structure that you then group employees by similar roles. So you say salespeople are in one group, sales and marketing, you're together, accounts, all of you are together, production guys, or if you're in projects, development, okay, development is one thing, quality is one thing. And then we finally have HR and we close the entire structure. So you have, this is the most common thing that you have a functional thing. But as you become bigger, you have a divisional structure. So what happens is then you can't have the same structure because dynamics are very different. So you divide it into divisions. Divisions could be product based, it could be geography based, it could be customer based. It could be on any of these logical things. For example, if you have a division, the divisions that exist in Tata Motors are passenger cars and trucks. Trucks are very different. You deal with a very different clientele than compared to cars. Cars are a more finicky, their personal, emotional touch, all that is needed. You don't need that in truck. A truck owner is not going to get emotional. He's looking at it as a means of earning money. So the dynamics are very different. Okay, so what happens is as companies become bigger, they have divisions where you're doing it. Okay, anybody work for HP? So HP have their software division, they have their servers, and they have printers. Now the printers is bought by anyone. It can be bought by you. It could be bought by a company. Those dynamics are very different from the server market. The server market used to exist before. Okay, all of you giving me blank look. Server market used to exist before cloud came into picture, and then it virtually disappeared. It's still there, but it's not as powerful as it used to be. Yeah, the mainframe. So it is very different. They sold off laptops because it was a low margin thing and it had a lot of issues. Then you have the software thing, which is very different. So depending on the divisions you have these divisions that you have in the company. Each division will then have its own accounting people, its own HR people. You could have formal organizations where all the policies are same, or you can have very, very different policies. Okay, so for example, you have in Wipro, you have the hardware division too that exists, or lighting that exists. Now you can't say, lighting, in Wipro you have lighting. Wipro make lights? Do you know Wipro make consumer products? Now, do you think that the guy who's making software and the guy who's selling soap, there should be a correlation in HR policies between both these people? Or do you think that market is different, this market is different? What do you think? No, I'm asking you a question. You're asked saying that there's a small division selling soaps, okay, and that has a small manufacturing company, and they have some salespeople who go out and sell these soaps. And you have the software division. Now, do you think HR policies can be the same? So then I have to say that, okay, you will have one HR person for soap division, we'll have one HR person for the division that is making the software division. So that's exactly what they do. They have very different things. Or they have Wipro G, which makes medical thing. Again, very different. So depending on what is the policies, the dynamics of the business, you have a structure where you come up with divisions which are different. So division, any large company has divisions. Any large company would have multiple divisions. You could have divisions based on customers, on geographies, and combination of both. And so we now come to this organization, which we call the matrix organization. Have you heard of the matrix organization? All of you in IT have heard of it. You've heard of it. Yeah. How many of you from IT? Okay. So most IT companies would have a matrix organization. So yeah. Now, what is a matrix organization? A matrix organization has that. How does an IT company work? So you have projects. Okay. We'll look at. Okay. Uh, let's look at a matrix organization. So what happens in a matrix organization in a company is that it has different projects. And in the project, you could have, if the project is very big, you have, suppose a project has 150 people. So it has its own accounts person, it has its own HR person, it has its own quality person. Okay, because this is a very large team. Now the HR person reports to two people. He reports to the project manager for the project related things, and he reports to the HR manager for HR related things. Similarly, the account person reports to the project manager for project accounting reasons, but reports also to the CFO or the head of accounts for accounting related things. So what it does is you do both. You have a functional thing and a divisional thing. Okay, so the matrix organization has both. So what happens is the projects get the focus they need, and the company ensures standardization because the HR manager or the accounts manager is also supervising the individual accounts people. So you ensure similarity of practices right across the country. You ensure that all the things that have to be done are done, and therefore it is a very effective, very commonly used in. So to give an example, this is how it is in case of a college. So you have the various departments and you have the various functions. So this undergrad department will have one accounting guy, finance guy, one IT guy, management, marketing. But these people they will also report to the head of undergrad, but also report to the head of accounting. So for all the undergrad reporting, he will talk to this undergrad head. For accounting relating things, the undergrad guy does not know. If he asks him some accounting thing, what should the entries be? This fellow will not know. He will then talk to the accounts head to ensure all those things are done. So that is how you have a matrix organization. Okay. So you have worked in a matrix organization. Is that you're from which company? Okay. So you have a matrix organization. Okay. Hmm. Okay. So both of them will guide you on different things, on different parts of them. Okay. Now, what do you think is the advantage of this, of having a matrix organization? So matrix organization means you have two bosses. What's the advantage of this? Why do you think people came up with a matrix organization? Yeah. Now, what happens is that, you know, does somebody know which was the first, what happened is people used to have, it evolved. This matrix organization didn't happen overnight. It sort of evolved. And in India too, the IT industry didn't start off with a matrix organization. They started off with a functional organization. And they said, we have projects. This project is we are going to make some software for Bank of America, or we are going to do something for Unilever, or some of the other companies. So we are going to make that. And there used to be a project manager. That person would have a whole lot of engineers doing various functions, and the project would happen. But what happened because of that is that they found that certain areas were not supporting them enough. So, for example, what do you think in a project? What do you think is the department where they require somebody who is part of the project, who will only do their work? What do you think is the department that they require for doing that? What are some of the departments you think a project will require that you be done? If I'm a project manager, in addition to technical people, who are the other people I need to help me run my project efficiently? Huh? Finance. Yeah, you were saying something. HR, finance. But anybody else? Any other department you can think of? HR was the first one. The second one was travel, because these people had people traveling to US, coming back, traveling to other parts of the world. So you needed a dedicated travel person who will only look at that. Because otherwise, if you have a travel department, what will they say? They'll say, raise a ticket. In the order in which it comes, I'm going to serve you. So that didn't work very well, because sometimes there is urgent requirements, or there are requirements which are very different. So you require your own person. So that's how the matrix organization formed, that they started doing that. But then the head of travel said, okay, what about me? This fellow will not listen to me. So they said, okay, you will report to both of them. Now it is fairly common to have a matrix organization, because especially if you have different projects, so you are dealing with different customers, the HR person's role is very, very different. Okay, so for example, in a bank, the retail banking is mass recruitment. So the HR's person role is to look at the numbers and get the numbers in as quickly as possible, get that onboarded as quickly as possible, and to ensure that they're deployed as quickly as possible. That's the role of the HR. If you are in private banking or personal banking, you don't have mass, you have quality recruitment. So the HR person's role is to find the right person and to bring the right talent into the company, talk to them, attract the right talent to do those things. So the challenges are very different. And therefore, what happens is you need different HR people to do. The mass person is a person who gets the job done. You want 200 people done in the end of the month. The private banker is saying, I want very specific skills. So you can't, I don't care if you take a month or two, but get me the right guy. So this person has to search and find and target the right people, then attract this person. There is a much, much longer process that happens, because that person who is there also is not going to come very easily. So the HR person's role is a lot more detailed, takes a lot more effort before this person comes in. So when you're doing mass recruitment, it is a thing that you call 100 people, 70 will come to an interview, you will recruit 20, you will make offers to 20, in that 15 will join. Okay, that's how it is. So if I know how many people, I just multiply by that and I conduct that, and my job is done. You can't do that if you're looking at specialized people. Or in IT, if you're looking at specialized skills which are not commonly found. If I want somebody who's worked on Informatica or some platform like that, they're not very easy to find. Very few people would have worked on that, but the client wants it, which means I don't find them on monster.com or naukri.com. I'll have to go and do something. I don't find them on LinkedIn. I'll have to go and actually find people. That's not always easy. That is really so that is where metrics form. The biggest problem with, what do you think is the biggest problem with we'll come to virtual organization, but what do you think is the biggest problem with matrix organization?
We cannot utilize the resources effectively because of the reporting challenges.
Okay, what are the other problems? What happens if one manager is telling do my job and the other manager says no, do my job? HR manager says make the organization manual, that's more important. Project manager is saying recruit people, that's more important. And the HR person gets caught in the crossfire. So you could have a situation where you get caught in the thing, or the other extreme. What is the other extreme? If I'm a smart guy,
It plays to the core where work-life balance will be questioned.
yeah, or I'm a smart employee. I tell one boss the other person's job I'm doing, and tell the other boss I'm doing this person's job, and do nothing. Have a nice, happy life, work-life balance. So that's the other problem. So for this to work, there has to be a lot of maturity on all levels. While I say that, a lot of organizations have matrix organizations work pretty well in India. So virtually all large projects will have a matrix organization. Okay, so this is how it is. Uh, though in some companies they have moved away from certain functions. For example, travel now is virtually centralized because they found that it was inefficient to have a matrix organization for travel. One of the earliest things to move into a matrix, but then now they're saying it makes sense to move them out. So what happens in uh, in companies like Accenture is that they have a different company providing all these services, and they have teams. So they have a sort of a quasi matrix structure. They're not even part of your company, but you have a team who's servicing you. So they're still responsible for you. And when it comes to appraisal, your inputs are also taken. So though they are not part of your organization, you still tell the manager how well this person performed in fulfilling your expectations and duties. Now, the virtual organization is an organization where we don't see each other. We are managing people who are in some other location. Okay, so this has become very normal during the COVID time. Virtually all organizations became virtual. There is a company. Have you heard of a company called Kevin Care? Um, yeah, so
Yeah, that's
yeah, consumer thing.
Ranganathan Industries, right?
Yeah, and they are now moved into a complete virtual mode. Everybody works from home. Everybody's got a laptop, and they are selling off their head office in Chennai. Everybody operates from home, uh, and then they're saying that you can have a get together every month where you can talk to each other. Otherwise, do it on phone or do it on Zoom. So you have virtual organizations coming up because the savings are going to offset the loss of product. Yes, there would be the odd guy who sleeps till 9 o'clock and goes to office at 11 o'clock. Yeah, but the work is going to catch up with that person. If you have a proper structure where you are following with people and you have a structure of reporting, you know that person is not working because the company doesn't care if you go to work at 11 and you work till 9 o'clock. The company doesn't care because the productivity is there. So a lot of in lots of sales people, the market opens up late. If you're in FMCG, for example, nobody opens at 9:30. Everybody opens only at 11. So there's no point for the salesperson to go out and start working at 11. So the person might work, but then they work late. They work till 8 or 9 because that is when they can meet people. So if you have a proper process, it is fine. Otherwise, this has become the norm. The next thing is to talk about, I had not talked about bureaucracy, so let me talk about bureaucracy. So all of you have heard of this phrase called bureaucracy, often used as a negative word. Okay, so 1 minute, let me just mute people. Why do you think bureaucracy happened? Why do you think bureaucracy came? So why do you think people got bureaucratic? Like the Indian government, for example. So they said that you can't have a structure where people can take their own decisions. So everything has to be as per a rule. And that rule is a logical rule. And therefore, this person should have no discretion, or this person should not use his or her own mind in taking this decision. This is the situation, do this. You want a license, give form in triplicate. It has to be filled in black pen only. That's the rule. So if I'm a RTA, I can't question that and say, okay, why can't this person write in blue pen? I can't do that because that's the rule. So what happened is that when you want people to work without discretion, without any initiative, and to only follow rules, you would use a bureaucratic system where everything is about the rules, everything is about precedent, everything is to do things by the book. It kills all initiative, it kills all any form of motivation because you're expected to go by the book. Okay, so that is another form of organization. So as organizations become more and more, as they become bigger, they also become uh, they also become bureaucratic. So all of you know Satya Nadella, right, of Microsoft. So when he became the head of Microsoft, when he became the CEO of Microsoft, he had individual meeting with all the departments and he asked them one question. They all came with fancy presentation. He said, forget the presentation. Just tell me one thing. How does your department help me sell more of Microsoft products? Simple. Just tell me that. Don't give me a story. And I think 6 or 7 departments were wound up because he didn't get a logical answer. So you do have bureaucracy coming in and saying that we should have this department. So his question, therefore, to break bureaucracy was very simple. Are you helping me sell more of my products? If not, you don't have a reason to exist. Don't tell me stupid things like we are help. Departments gave him justification that we are going to promote and to ensure more users use that. He said, rubbish. Tell me how you are helping me sell. If you are telling me things like, we are promoting internet and we are going to do that, I'm not interested. So people ensured, there were departments that promoted empowerment of disenfranchised communities. People had a nice cushy life. They would go to conferences and talk about rubbish about how Microsoft is going to connect communities in Africa or someplace. He said, rubbish. Department, thank you very much. Nice working with Microsoft. Tomorrow you're all off. I'm serious. He wound up departments because it made no sense. So lots of times you would find all these unnecessary departments that come in, and these unnecessary departments come up with their own rules. And they unfortunately don't help in the organization. They don't help the organization course. So if you have bureaucratic things and you're having a position of power, please ensure that they're removed. Virtual organization. Okay. Okay. So fine. So one of the things that we are talking about is to ensure downsizing. Okay. So you all understand downsizing? Downsizing is when some of the employees are asked to leave. Okay. If one employee is asked to leave for bad performance, not that is understandable. But when the company says let's lay off 10% of our staff, or that's unfortunately one of the things that is going to. What do you think is the biggest reason for downsizing in India? A lot of companies downsize in India too. What do you think is the biggest reason why people are let go in India? Not cost. Okay, cost cutting in a big way. Yeah. But more importantly, technology. Infosys, there were a lot of people doing manual jobs. Automated disappeared. There used to be, all of you have heard of this company called ICICI Prudential. They sell life insurance. Now, what happens is that there used to be a manual life insurance application given. An application is a very, very important document in a life insurance thing because it's a basis for any conflict resolution. So if you take the company to court, that is the basis on which the judge would adjudicate and say whether it was right or wrong. So it's a very important legal document. So what used to happen is there used to be an application, and there used to be an army of people who would enter that, low level people, outsourced, who would enter this application onto the system so that it can be processed. Then somebody in this one in ICICI had the brilliant idea saying, why don't we use the Aadhaar database? So what happens now is that you just give your Aadhaar card number. Once you enter the card, all the details come in. You don't have to fill in anything. All the details are filled in. You just have to fill in the insurance question, which the agent or the person from the bank does, and it is submitted electronically. 15,000 jobs disappeared overnight. So technology, if you are doing some very low level job, not doing too much of contribution to an organization, you could disappear overnight. Okay, just imagine nobody, when Aadhaar card came in, nobody said, nobody connected that to ICICI and said that this is going to create loss of jobs, but it did. So you could have these sort of job losses. Even in Infosys, low level jobs, there used to be people who would see, what used to happen is that there would be a testing team, and the testing team would test it out. But there would be a person who would take bug report, which is say, okay, all the problems in the software. His only job was to take reports for a lot of projects. They automated that, that job disappeared. So technology is going to become, if for low level jobs, we are going to have a problem. Definitely technology is going to create demand for other type of jobs. So whenever there is technology, remember that there is a job that was created. Okay, now let me ask you an interesting question. When industrial revolution, all of you know industrial revolution, first time you had mechanization actually come. You know which was the job that was most in demand during the industrialization, that industrial revolution days? 1800 types, 1750, 1800 types. You know which was the job most in demand? What do you think was the job that was most in demand? No, not army. You have factories coming up everywhere. They required people. And this created a requirement of a very, very special, very, somebody you never thought was connected to factories. And those people were butchers. Why? Because animal grease was used in all these factories. It was in shortage. Because you just butchered enough to this, but now they're saying butcher the animals so that we produce enough grease to supply to that. So butchers became a shortage, and so butchers became a job in demand. So that of course it disappeared over a period of time, but you could have whenever you have a new type of industrial revolution happening, some jobs disappear and newer jobs come in. Unfortunately, with technology, higher paid, higher qualified people jobs are coming up, and low level jobs are disappearing because they're getting automated. But that's part of the nature. So this is as far as organization. Okay, so let's go on to the next one, which is on conflict and negotiation. Now we all so far we've been talking about organization where teams and groups and motivation, where everyone were being very nice to each other. But in reality, you could also have conflicts in a team. Are there conflicts that happen in your teams? Do people fight? Okay. Do you have big fights where they? No. Huh? Cold War happens. Silent treatment. Okay. Called passive aggression. That I will not tell you anything, but I will not cooperate with you either. Most of the time. Okay. So we look at what are the types of conflict and why it occurs. What do you need to do? Okay. So why does conflict happen? Difference of opinion, and one side feels that there has been something that is unfair that has happened to me. So there is a conflict. I don't like some event that has happened or some reward that I was to get. I have not got it. All these cases, there is a conflict. Now, if the conflict is about a job related thing, it is called functional conflict and it's a good thing. For example, now, I don't know if it is from this class, but somebody yesterday was talking about quality and okay, you're from IT. Are you in regular projects and development? Okay. So in typically what happens in an IT company is that there are when you are talking about software development, there are two departments that happen, or there are two groups that exist in a project. One are people who write the code, and there are people who test the code to ensure it meets what the customer wants. That is called a quality department. Okay, it is also called testings in some of the companies, sometimes called quality. Now, whatever you're talking about, these people test the code. And then what happens is they send a report saying that developer, you thought you wrote a great piece of code. These are the mistakes. Do you think the developers like it? What happens is that the structure of an organization is designed to produce conflict. It's an intentional thing. Why? So that the customer gets the right product, right quality. So what will testing say? Bad quality. No, very good. So, but in the process, the customer gets. Now, the conflict does not happen because of a personal fight. It happens because of the nature of the job. Other thing, anybody here who does auditing? Okay, you do. You do process auditing or you do accounts? Process audit. So what happens when you go and tell those people, hey, no, but are they very nice and say, you know what? This is what you are saying? What do you know? Do you don't know ground reality? But why does the company have a job like this? To ensure process is important. Is that a third person is looking at the process and saying, this is not the right way. It needs to improve. You need a third person to do it. Accounts auditing does the same thing, where they go out and say that was all the accounting, is it proper? Is it as per the norms? So you could have conflict happening just because of the department you work. So you could actually nothing wrong with the people who are in development and testing. They're all the same people. They usually come from the same pool of software that you can find. But the fact is that the nature of the job is to ensure that it creates that. Why is it built? To ensure that overall the company, their norms, especially quality, is improved. Quality, productivity, all that is improved. For example, in process, do you also ensure it is smooth and streamlined and you ensure all that? Okay. Yeah. So errors, rework, loss of productivity, all that is a word. So the company says, the CEO says, which company do you work for? Okay. And who's the CEO of the company? Okay. Okay. So he is saying, hey, you know what? These two guys are fighting. Let them. My customers are happier. So it's worth the fight. So the company, so the conflict is built into a company. Does it mean that they're going to have a physical fight? No. Are they going to love each other? No. So the relation is going to be somewhere in between. But because it is always emotionally hurtful for somebody to come and, I'm a manager, I've been there for 2 years, 3 years, I think I know everything. And this guy is coming and saying, hey, you know what, 4 defects, change it. Not a very, even if you tell it politely, it is not always well received, but it is good for the organization. So some amount of conflict happens because of functionality. And in a company, therefore, some amount of conflict is good for the company. Okay, so if he goes around telling, hey, you know what, great processes, it will never improve. That's not what the company wants. The company wants continuous improvement. The company wants, or say, if you're in auditing from the accounts department, they want to ensure that everything is proper. So even if it's a small thing, they're going to do that. Same thing in testing. They're going to say that, is it proper? Would the customer find it easy to use? Or is it too complicated? So they look at everything. They look at instructions. They look at documentation. They look at all areas and say that, what are the things that can be improved? So there is constant improvement that happens because of conflict. It doesn't lead to very, very, very nice relation. Nice relationship is a desired goal. It is not a necessary goal for an organization to suffer. The company doesn't bother if there are few people who do fight with each other. Oh, what do you do in Amazon? Or for recruiting? Okay. So do the departments put pressure on you saying, I want it tomorrow, where are the people? Do you have pressure or? Okay. Okay. So you're given a volume and you're expected to recruit so many people. Okay. Okay. So in any company, you would find some amount of this. Similarly, for example, the job of the security guard or the security department, even IT security, is to find flaws and to say, hey, you have not done it. Should that person be very trusting? No. That person should look at everything and say, hey, there is a big problem that I have. Does it mean that you're going to be happy with the security? May not be. But he fulfills an important function. That is what is functional conflict all about. What else? Just give me 1 minute. It's gone. Yeah. When the conflict is very nice and you're having some level, it is uh, it is healthy. It is good for the organization. When the conflict becomes the end, and each department says, let's fight with each other, that becomes an end. That is when it becomes dysfunctional, and you have. So if you're going to the meeting and you're saying, hey, quality meeting, that is, they're going to point out things, fine, nothing wrong. But if you're very happy saying, I'm from quality, I'll go and fight with the other department, that is dysfunctional. It happens. It's not a very uncommon thing. For what are the types of conflict that exist? It exists because of the task, about the job that I do. It happens. The other part is about relationship conflict. Relationship conflict happens because I don't like the other person. Very common. Can I ask everybody in the company to love each other? No. Now, you don't like certain people. You don't like the way they talk. You don't like the way they react to each other. So you have a problem with that. Again, unless it becomes too much, usually nothing happens. Everybody says it's your problem, sort it out. Okay, so you could have relationship problems. Relationship problems could, It's only when you affect the company that you have a problem. For example, do you know Indigo Airlines? All of you know Indigo Airlines. So the two founders were fighting. So when the two founders of the company are fighting, it is a serious thing. That is when everybody got involved. That is serious stuff. And it was not that I hate you type of thing. You know, you can't have them fighting at that level. So, or it could be that about process, about how the work gets done. So you have a problem with that. Now, the conflict can exist between two people. Uh, then you could happen within a team, or it can happen with one team with the other. All of them are possible. By its very nature, conflict is not negative. By its very nature, it doesn't mean that there's conflict that somebody has to intervene and do that. Only when it becomes a little too much that you have a problem with that. Now, when you have what are the things that create the conflict, and then you have the other things. So let's look at these 5 things about managing conflict. Okay, so when you're talking about conflict, there are many ways in which you can manage a conflict. The first one is called competing. When you're managing conflict and you're talking of competing, it means that each of those people who are involved, it could be one person, it could be a department, it could be a team, doesn't matter. But there are two parties involved in the conflict. Now, if the two parties say the only way this conflict will be resolved is if I win and the other person loses, that mode of managing conflict is called competing. Everything is about me winning. So if you fight with me, you will lose. So my only concern is not to ensure that the conflict is resolved, but that I should feel that I have won. The biggest problem that you have now is Ukraine, where he knows he's not doing very well, but he can't pull out till he can tell people I have won. Otherwise, the people will say, why did you go? So you have people saying that every conflict my way. Okay, there are two ways of doing. No. My way is way one. You'll only do that. That is about competing. So in competing, what happens? You don't care really about relationships. You're only concerned with whether I got my way or not. So when do you think you will use competing as a mode of resolving conflict? Have you seen competing? Each side saying I'm right, you're wrong. So give me an example where it happens. But my way. Okay. You can see competing when two people are involved in an accident on the road. Does somebody say, hey, yeah, I was wrong. I shouldn't have come on the wrong way. No, they're both saying I'm right. And you're wrong. Often told with very colorful language and with a lot of aggression. In competing that happens in the company too, the colorful language is not used because of the corporate setting, but it is aggression. Both sides displaying aggression and saying, my way. You will only do it my way. Oh, this is a problem. The problem is happening because of you. So you do this. The other person says, no, it's happening because of you. You do this. So it becomes a problem. And so when you have too many people competing, you have somebody, the leader usually steps in and takes a decision. So the leadership, finally, it is a task of the leader to then step in. If it is too much, it is disturbing the team, disturbing the trust in the team. You might have the leader stepping in and say, enough is enough. The opposite of competing is when you are accommodating. Accommodating is that I will, okay, I can't fight this person, so I'm going to agree to what this person says. I'm going to fight to some extent, tell this other person I'm not very happy with what it is. But if that other person insists, then I'm not going to fight it. Usually happens in a boss subordinate relationship, or a powerful person and a person who perceives himself to be not so powerful. It happens then because the other person says, how long will I fight? The other person, unfortunately, is my boss, and boss says, do it, I'll do it. So you can see such things when the boss asks you to work on holidays, Sundays. Does the boss ask you to do that? No? You have a nice boss. Because the favorite is a favorite activity of bosses to say work on a Sunday. Now, is it happy? So what do you do when your bosses work on a Sunday or on a holiday? Not respond, okay. Not respond, but will turn up on that day and log in. But we'll keep quiet, will not rock to the boss. Yeah, you were saying, what do you do when turn up in whites? Turn off all the devices. Go to sleep. Huh? Nice boss. Okay. Nothing happens the next day. On the next day, yeah, everything. Yeah. So yeah, I used to work, and I used to have very innovative employees. What they would do is remove the SIM card of their mobile. Then it says out of range. It doesn't say turned off. Yeah, I was in some Kardagodi, or I was in some other part of, I was in Anikal, and signal is a problem there. That's the excuse. You can't then say, because the person who was at home sleeping, but what happens is that accommodation, if your boss has come, you don't like it, but you say, boss, you know what? No, you have to come. You protest and then you turn up. Accommodation, because you say, how much can I fight my boss? Finally, that person is a boss. So you're accommodating, and the other thing is to avoid the conflict. Turn off all devices. Avoid the boss. Don't go to the boss at all. Okay, the there is this wonderful clip where Saurav Ganguly is talking about the time he was batting with Virendra Sehwag. So they had lost the first two matches, and they had to make some 300 odd runs in the second innings. So he told, and they had ample time. They had 2 days. So he said, Viru, don't bat with your usual aggression. We have a lot of time. So we have a lot of time, and So the bowler bowled, and Viru hit him for a six. So the fellow said, yeah, it's okay, fine. Next ball, four. Third ball, another six. Over. Now, after the over, they come and talk to each other. So what did Viru do? Viru decided to whistle a song and go towards the umpire, avoiding the conflict. He knows what the captain will tell him. So what do? Don't go there at all. Avoid. Why? Because it's a very short time. Bowler will have to bowl. So he kept whistling, looking all over the place, knowing very clearly what this was. So sometimes we avoid conflict. When the conflict is avoided as a matter of strategy, it is a positive thing. For example, the team manager says two people are fighting, let them fight. If it becomes too much, then I will intervene. It is decided, it is thought out, it is a well thought of action plan. It is not out of cowardice. It is not out of that I don't want to get into a fight. It is because I feel that it is not productive if I get involved in all fights. So let those two people fight it out. And I'm going to do nothing. If it becomes unproductive, if those two people are having a physical fight, or the abuse becomes a little too much, then I will step, avoiding. So avoid the entire thing. The other thing is that compromise. Have you heard this word compromise? Okay, so how do you compromise in during this one? Compromise is not necessarily positive. Okay, so What happens is, suppose I want 100, the other person wants 100, and we say, okay, I take 50, you take 50. So I'm really not very unhappy. I'm also not very happy. The other person is also not very unhappy. The other person is also not very unhappy. So we have somewhere in between. That is what compromise is. If they can't be a solution, then compromise is the best. Okay, if there is only one resource and that person has to be shared, then the only way you can do is to come up with a compromise. Okay, then what can you do? You can cut that person in half. Okay, so that is what you remember the story. There was a guy called King Solomon who had suggested that, and ridiculous story. That you cannot do that. So you come up with a company. The last one is collaboration, where both sides work on that. Can we come up with something that will keep both of us happy? How do I ensure both of us are happy? That is collaboration. Collaboration takes longer, but relationships are maintained and the solution that comes is of lasting value. So finally, there has to be solution found. Even if you are fighting with each other, finally there has to be a solution. How long will you keep fighting with each other? And that will happen only when you put your heads together and do that. So I'll give you an example. You know Niagara River? Have you seen Niagara Falls? So the river flows from the US side to the Canadian side. And America built a power plant and Canada built a power plant because it's a river that they can use to generate electricity. Now, these are huge power plants built on the opposite sides. And what happened because of that is that there is a fish called trout. And the fish moves in one direction during summer and it moves in the opposite direction in the winter. Now, because of the power plants having in both sides, the movement of the trout was being affected and it had a lot of environment damage because of that. And trout fishing is a very popular pastime in both America and Canada. So there were a lot of people unhappy with this entire thing. So what do politicians do when they are faced with a problem? Compete. So American politicians said Canada closed down. Canada said, why should we close down? You close down. And this rubbish went on for some time. And then they got together and say, hey, this is not solving the problem. So what do we do? And therefore, what they did is they came up with a lasting solution to the problem. The solution was that the American power plant will work for 6 months. The Canadian power plant will work for 6 months. In the 6 months that it works, the American side will supply free power to the Canadian side, whatever some amount quantum decided, and the Canadian side will do the same thing. So American side got its power project, Canadian got its power project, trout is able to move freely. Win-win for everyone. That is what collaboration does. Does it, for example, the other side of the other thing that I think it was, I don't know if it was in whose government, but after almost 30, 40 years, the governments of India and Bangladesh agreed to let the good carrier move through Bangladesh. Okay, that was a big thing. It cuts a lot of travel time for the Indian truckers and it gives revenue to Bangladesh because they charge the truckers for using that part of it. So both sides benefit. And the Indian trucker is willing to do because it cuts travel time by almost 5-6 hours. But it took 30 years for them, for the Indian and the Bangladesh government to come to this understanding, working very well. So they're talking about move. So in states like Tripura, it makes sense to actually cut across Bangladesh and to come towards India again. The travel time is reduced when you do that, rather than you go through the circuitous route. So both sides, now the travel time is cut and this person is willing to pay that amount to whatever is being asked to Bangladesh. So Bangladesh, by doing nothing, by allowing truckers to come in their territory, is gaining revenue. And the Indian truckers are getting, they are ensuring that they save a lot of travel time. Both sides are willing to pay. And both sides are very happy with the deal. That is what happens when you collaborate. That can you get both sides happy with an agreement? That is what you do. That is exactly what you do. So let me just take another 5 or 10 minutes, and can we break at 11:15? Okay, so we talked about that, and we talked about all this. So we are not going to worry too much, and we talk about negotiation. One part of handling conversation conflict, not only conflict. Negotiation is something that we do for a lot of things. It is, what do you think is negotiation? Before we get into some of the fundamentals of negotiation, what do you think? When do we negotiate? Okay, we negotiate when there is something that we need to solve, and there are many alternatives to do it. So each side wants to take the pick one alternative which is more suitable for them, which may not be suitable. So we get into a negotiation and we come. The most obvious thing is when somebody wants to buy something and other person wants to sell something, and I think the price is very high, the other person feels the price is very low, and we come across and we come to a middle point somewhere when we agree and we both smile and we say, okay, fine, I agree to the deal. That's what is the most common form of negotiation. Now, what happens with the difference between distributive bargaining and integrative bargaining is that what happened in distributive, that they believe that there is a cake and it needs to be divided among the warring parties. The integrative side says that how do we increase the size of the cake, so that can we get both of you to be happy in the negotiation process. So there have been many times when people have negotiated and ensured that both parties, the biggest thing about this is win-win. A good negotiation is always about win-win. Okay, so uh, Tata Steel, which Tata Steel started in 1903, they've not had one day of strike. Why did they not have one day of strike? Because the management said that locking down the plant is not a solution. It's off the table. The workers said that retrenching people without discussing with the union is not an option. Both sides agreed to this ground rule. They've never had a strike because they said two extreme options are off the table. So whatever solutions we have to be found which is not so bad, and they've never had a problem. So when you have both sides who want to find a solution, negotiation happens in an atmosphere of trust, an atmosphere of trying to find a solution to a problem. So it could be a very simple thing of you buying a car, two nations negotiating to find out to come up to with a deal. So we are looking at that, and negotiation. So if you look at the thing, Russia offered India the crude oil at a lower price. But India didn't really jump and say, we are going to buy as much of oil, please give. The terms were better. Why do you think India didn't do that? And Russia is really far. It is not really a very viable thing to bring crude from there. It is really far. And they don't want to disturb the negotiation they've had with long-term partners like Saudi Arabia. They say, these people, the Russian thing will last for 2 months, it could last for 6 months. But the Saudi Arabia is what we have to go back even tomorrow or day after. So we are not going to disturb that. So when you're negotiating and you have a deal, a lot of people look at the longer term rather than a short term gain. You're looking at long. So you are saying short term, I might make a loss, but long term, this is a better deal and we will go ahead with that. A lot of benefits happen when you have a longer term deal. People believe you are a more stable partner and they would rather do business with you if you're a stable partner. Rather than a partner you're looking for deals every day, then it becomes a problem. Okay, so what happens is that if these party A believes that I want to settle in this range from here to here, party B says, okay, in this range, I will. So the overlapping section is a settlement range in which both parties negotiate. The wider that is, the easier the negotiation. The narrower that is, the more difficult the negotiation. In narrow, the wriggle room is very less. When the wriggle room is more, then you have a, a more lasting solution that happens. People have walked out of deals. The latest, I think, we are seeing is with Twitter and Elon Musk. The most ridiculous deal I have seen in a long time. There is simply no synergy, and it is just a show of money. And now he's coming up with unfair demands and saying that you prove this and you prove that. So my feeling is that he's going to walk out of the deal soon. Take the loss rather than get into this mess. Okay, so now what is the integrative negotiation that happens? Both parties try to find out what you need, and then you say, okay, fine. What is it that we both are trying to achieve? A good negotiation is when both parties have a win-win too. Now, what happened was that Albert Einstein. Now, Albert Einstein was a Jew. So when the Nazi started coming in, he thought his life was in danger. So by then he had already won a Nobel Prize. So he sent a telegram, because in that days that was the only mode of thing. And he in that talked about him being and he was well known, so he didn't really have to say, I'm advertised and I'm a Nobel Prize. People knew. So he sent a mail, he sent a telegram to the head of Department of Physics to Princeton University, saying that I'm interested in a job and would Princeton be interested? And he said, I'm willing to work for 8,000 US dollars. That was the telegram that now any college, no matter how good, if you're getting a Nobel Prize, you're not going to say no to that. You're getting a Nobel Prize guy who wants to come and teach in a university, you're not going to say that. So the head of department says, your offer to work in a teaching position is accepted. However, your salary that you have is rejected, and Princeton is making a counter offer of 27,000 US dollars. Stupid? He asked for 8,000, you could say 8,000. Those of you are HR saying, what a stupid thing to do. But Albert Einstein never left Princeton University. He only worked there. He never looked for another job. Why did they offer that? Because they knew this fellow is a Nobel Prize thing. If he underpay that, when he comes to the US, he'll realize he's underpaid and he'll look at options. Nobel Prize, everybody is willing to take him, he might move. Because they gave him a fair offer, he never looked around. The whole life, he worked for Princeton University. So look at the long-term gain. So sometimes in negotiation, you take short-term losses for long-term gains. Otherwise, what happens is that, let's grind this fellow down. 8,000, I'll pay only 6,000. In his desperation, he would have agreed. My life is in danger because of my religious beliefs. I'm going to accept whatever you say. But when I come here and I realize my worth, after 6 months, I'm going to talk to other university and leave. So you're going to get a short-term gain. In negotiation, you also look at long-term benefits. And you say, is there a long-term benefit rather than just taking a short-term gain? That is what good negotiation is all about. Compromise, saying, okay, fine, let's 8,000, 7,000, that type of thing. The negotiation practice starts with preparation. Any negotiation starts with you preparing your position, saying, what am I going to say? What is it I want? Then what are the ground rules? Then why do I think I deserve so much? Clarification, justification, then some amount of bargaining, and then you close the deal. The rule to negotiation is, remember, the negotiation is not the end product. It is the means to end the end product. If this person does not like the negotiation, they can do other things. They can delay the agreement. They can do lots of things. So a good negotiation is always win-win. Okay. So that is what culturally, We'll just talk about culture and then we break for tea. People like Japanese are tough negotiators. And the negotiation process in Japan and China is very different from what it happens in the US. In US is very quick. If they like your deal, they'll go ahead. In Japan, they first have to like the technical offering that you have. So once a product and all that is agreed, then they get into the price negotiation. And they'll wear you down. So many years ago, I was working for Xerox and we wanted to improve our product offerings. We wanted to move away from Xerox because Xerox didn't have everything and we wanted to offer other products and we were looking for a partner. And we liked Canon of Japan and we thought their value system was very close to us. So Canon had an office in Delhi and we were also based in Delhi and we started negotiating with Canon. Now, what happened is my boss, who was a general manager, went to Japan to close the deal. We had finalized everything. So the deal, when he went there, there was somebody from Canon who received him at there. And when they received him, they told him, they asked him very casually, how many days are you there in Japan? He told, I'm there for 1 day. So what happened was that when he went for negotiation, they knew everything about him personally. Japanese believe that you negotiate with people, so it's important to understand people. So the Japanese, the Canon Indian team had briefed them on everything. They knew his wife's name, they knew his children's name, they knew the brand of cigarette he smoked, they knew what he drank in the evening, his hobbies, they knew everything about him. He knew nothing about them. Why we didn't think that's how we are going to negotiate. And they delayed the negotiation till it was 3 hours before he had a flight to catch. Put you under time pressure. So we, he said this is not the way to negotiate. We broke off negotiation. He came back to Delhi. And the Indian team then lot of damage control. They said, no, you misunderstood. We are not like that. We are actually very good. We are interested. Damage control done. So, but this time we were wiser. So he again went back to Japan. So the other side said, when are you going back? Again, same question. So he said, you know what? I have an open ticket to Delhi and I'm planning to see how this negotiation goes. Because if it doesn't go properly, I'm planning to go to Seoul, South Korea, and talk to Samsung. Because we had opened negotiation with Samsung. So the moment they heard that, the next day when he went to the company, negotiation started. Because they say, hey, this fellow will go and make a deal with that. To cut a long story short, we did go to Samsung and we found Samsung to be a lot more accommodative, a lot more, their terms were a lot more better, and therefore we did the deal with Samsung. Though our preferred partner was Canon, their value system was very close. Because of their need to be competitive in negotiating and to win every deal, they lost a big deal in India. Okay, so this is how actually culture plays a very, very big role. In America, if you are in the currency market or you're in bond market, you need to make a decision within a minute whether to accept or not. That's all the time window you have. So you talk to 3 people and within a minute you have to decide which one to take. So negotiation there is very, very quick. And they take a decision. It goes wrong, it goes wrong. The Japanese are a lot more careful in all things. They keep discussing and they keep discussing and then they come back to you. But when they come back to you, they're completely convinced that they want to go with you. So that's how the Japanese are. Culture is a very, very big thing in Japan. And in China, you negotiate the way you do in India. You find a local guy to talk to them. You will not negotiate without that. Otherwise, you could get really badly cheated. So you need they call it Guangzhou in China, which is the Indian equivalent of influence. You know influence? That somebody has influence. So you need to find an influential people. You need to find a person with Guangzhou in that area and you take this Guangzhou guy with you and you negotiate so that the fellow say, no, what are you talking? How can you do that? And that is when that's how you negotiate. You don't go to generally just go and talk to that person. Okay, so we come back and do the third thing there. It is 11:20 in my watch. Can we be back at 11:35? So we have one more chapter to do, and we have to discuss the parts that are important. How do the question come? Things like that. Okay. The last chapter is on organization change. How do you bring about change in an organization? So, has any of you been part of any transformation efforts that have happened in the company? Change of technology. Okay, you were part of. Okay. Oh, okay. 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 And how long did this entire process take? Okay. But how long before it was completely implemented? Okay. Okay. Now, different organizations, depending on how much the resistance to change is there, it depends on that when you're talking about. Now, nobody likes change. Okay. So when you are trying to change something, remember that nobody likes it. Everybody likes change when it does not affect them. Then it's a great idea. The moment you say, okay, your department, your team are going to get affected, that's when the resistance starts. Till then, it's all very nice. So one of the things about it is about how do you get change? We look at change and the why does change happen? Because largely change is by the first, the points 2 and 3, the major reasons for change. Because of economy, because of a need to ensure you make your product or service offering which is much better, you need to therefore come up with changes. You change things, or it could be change in ownership. And I don't know if you read today's paper that Air India is going to have a new system that they are going to implement. So they've said that our existing system will be down for a couple of days. They've given a public thing. They're trying to change the culture of the place. One of the biggest changes we are going to see, I don't know if it's going to be completely successful, is when Tatas have taken over Air India. The problem with Air India is not planes, but culture. Trying to change the culture of those employees is going to be the bigger challenge. Now, competition, especially global competition, is what also pushes people to change. So if you're a person, if you're very nice and comfortable, and you suddenly have competition coming in from the global players, we've seen that happening with a lot of MSME companies because of Chinese imports. Okay, so a lot of industries which used Indian silk have virtually, the Indian silk industry is going through a tough time because the Chinese silk, though not as good, is so much cheaper that people prefer that than to go in for a more expensive Indian silk. So you're very nice. You're talking about how do I improve that, and suddenly you have competition coming in from China. Now, in fact, if you are manufacturing, come. If you're manufacturing, virtually every segment of the market is affected by China. So remember that unfortunately our Indian dependence on China is so great that all the politician talk that we are going to boycott China is just that. We cannot do that. Okay, so the entire pharma industry, for example, depends on China for import. So there are chemicals called API which only come from China. So if you want to get globally competitive, then you have to look at all this. So competition is other thing. There could be a lot of other trends like global politics that could play a part. But change is part of the entire ecosystem and nobody likes change. Okay, so IBM used to be headed by a gentleman called Lou Gessner. He wrote a book about changing IBM and he called it Teaching an Elephant to Dance. So that is, I think, the apt description of getting people to change, because IBM was a huge company. Getting it to change was not easy. Okay, so therefore, the advantage was, and he talks about how people have different perceptions, and he gives an example of perceptions. And so the IBM had a rule that every salesperson should make 4 calls a day. However, their top salesperson, the person who sold the maximum, averaged 1.8 calls a day. So the head of sales, he was a killer. He did the maximum number of sales. So when Lou Gessner and he were giving an award to this person saying, great, you have done the maximum number of sales. The head of sales told him, you have done so much of sales doing at 1.8 calls a day. Think of how much of sales if you would have done if you had done 4 calls. Typical manager thinking, right? So the salesperson turned around and said, I did so much because I did 1.8 calls a day. Look at how much the company would have sold if each salesperson had done only 1.8 calls a day instead of 4. So there is always different perceptions when you are talking about change, that people have a different. So the person, like you were talking of being a champion, you have the optimistic view and there's a pessimistic view that comes from the other side. Why should I change? It is negative, nothing happens. Anybody has been part of an enterprise solution implementation, SAP or its equivalents? Nobody. Okay. Probably the most painful thing. It takes 3 years for it to be completely implemented. 3 years for the benefits to do. So it's a lot of investment of time and effort that goes in. And it's a painful thing. So you need to keep talking about that. And so let's look at that. Where does the entire thing happen? When we are talking about change and the resistance to change, where does the source come? It can come from individual sources. Why does it come from anything? Because I'm used to a certain thing. Why should I change? Why should I learn a new software or new way of doing things when I'm used to this? This is giving me the results that I want. Why do I want to change? So companies therefore spend a lot of time explaining benefits, and it should be a benefit at an individual level. Otherwise, why should I change? The benefit can't be profit to a company. It also has to be that how is it helping an individual to change? So the habit, one of the biggest and best examples of change management was done by the Indian Railways. The Indian Railways, they computerized, I think, in 1980s, somewhere in the 80s. We became one of the earliest railways in the world to computerize ticketing. Okay, now I don't know if you remember, they used to be, or if you still go to a small station, you will have a guy who will punch out a ticket and giving to you manual process. That's how it was. And otherwise, you've seen a computerized ticket, right? What you can do, what you can go onto the site and do the computerizing. Now, the people who were supposed to use the system were lot of them were old and had experience in the old system and had low levels of education. Now, how do you get them to be trained into a system of actually using and typing out and ensuring a computerized system? So the first thing the Indian Railways did is to place a computer in that section without any effort. They switched it on and did nothing else. They didn't tell them use it. Just it was lying there. So what happened is they ignored it. But there is a natural curiosity in human beings. It is lying there with that light, it is there, there's a screen, and so some bright spot would go and try to enter his name and enter that. And when he saw it is possible, it is easy to do that. Other people also say, what are you doing? Okay. So this natural curiosity help people to overcome the fear of the computer. And they left it, they said, bang on the keyboard. We're not going to ask you. So people kept doing that till they got over the fear of what a computer is. When it became very familiar, then they started the training on what the software is. Not till then. So it was a very, very sensitive process of managing change. So I think, a long time back, I think in about 2010, I went to Germany and I was told that I can't book a ticket online. So remember, in some areas, we are far ahead of the other countries. So we did that in 1980 with people who are 10th or 12th class pass, older people, none of whom had computer experience. Just look at the magnitude of change that the Indian Railways was trying to get. And therefore, they brought in so we've had in India, we've had some spectacular success with change management. And, those of you from the IT or the others, what do you think has been India's most successful project ever? India's hugely successful project. Somebody knows India's most successful project? The eradication of polio. Just look at the task. Every village, there could be a child in every village, and that child needs polio drops, and the Indian government has ensured that. And there was huge resistance. A lot of people said, my baby will get poisoned, and people didn't trust it. But over a period of time, we have eradicated polio. The only polio that comes in is from our neighboring countries. Pakistan, Bangladesh, they have not eradicated. Nepal, Bhutan have not eradicated polio. And so the polio could come in through that. Otherwise, the Indian children are all immunized. Every Indian child is immunized. So look at the change that the Indian government has brought about. Spectacular change. When it comes to social change, I can't see that anything that has been more successful than the polio program. We've had great thing. We've also had our share of not being able to manage change well. Why do people do it? The first one is habit. I don't want to change. The second is security. I might lose my job. What happens if, okay, I learn this technology, but then the technology is much better. They might think I'm not required, so I will not cooperate. There could be economic thing. And this, there is a thing called selective information processing. What do we call, this is a technical word. Selective information processing is a technical word. What do we call it? What do we call it in normal English? What happens the moment there is change? He was telling me, any of you others have been in a place when organization was trying to implement a change? I'm sure there's small or big, there are changes that are implemented in every. So if there's a big change coming in, what is the first thing that happens?
Resistance.
No, all that has happened. They've come and told you this is the change. Then what happens? So what happens because of ambiguity?
Confusion.
No, and something very nice happens, and it is called gossip. That is what we call selective information processing. That somebody has understood something, added a little masala to it, and feels that that person's responsibility to tell the whole world that my view of thing is there. So you will have wild rumors floating around. I was there in a company when we got taken over by another company. I was based in Bangalore. Our company was based in Mumbai. So I used to fly to Mumbai, have the meeting, and I was fly back. By the time I came back, there would be wild rumors floating around in the south saying that, oh, you know what happened in the meeting? This is what happened. That is what happened. I was there in the meeting and nothing like that happened. We had to come up with a lot of official information that we started giving. Then we said this is not going to work. After every meeting, there used to be an official. We used to give our side of the story. Did it stop the rumor? Totally no. People who wanted to believe us believed us. People who wanted to believe the rumor believed the rumor. But at least there was an official view out there. So you're going to have a lot of wild gossip floating around. What are the organization sources of resistance that the entire department may say we don't want to change? The entire department says why should. So you could also have organized resistance coming in from departments itself who are invested in the status quo. Now, if I'm very good in one technology and you're asking me to move to another technology, there is always a problem with that. one of the big advantages we have as Indians is our ability to move from one technology to another. Okay, so it was C++, then it was Java. We all moved to Java seamlessly. Or you want Python? Python there. Tomorrow you come up with a new language. 6 months you'll have people who are trained and ready to go on that. We actually move very quickly. It is not so easy for a lot of people to change. For example, if you went to a country like Germany, it is not very easy for them to. It's a very rigid, structured thing, very efficient system that is there, but very difficult to change. As long as the system works, great. You want to change it, it becomes a problem. So so therefore, you could have a personal, individual, but you could have what are the ways to overcome that? Communication, participation, get people to participate in the change. Try to take small steps. Okay, so then sometimes it is inevitable. If I'm changing software, my platform, I can't have baby steps. Then it is one shot. We train you, and on this day we move to the new system. But when you can try to ensure that the change is a little more gradual, that it is not very, you could create a large style panic in if you ask people to change. Definitely. If all of them fails, then you have coercion. You've heard of coercion, also called arm twisting. So your boss says very nicely, you don't want to change, then you're no longer required. What do you want to do? Do you want to change or do you want to remain in the company? And then you say, yes, yes, boss, I change. Don't worry. Tomorrow you change. That is the last step that the company takes. Is it required? Yes. There would always be about 20 or 25% who don't want to change anything. Those people are, so there's a story that goes that they wanted to buy, the company wanted to buy a group insurance policy. You understand, group insurance is insurance given to the entire company, not to one individual. The rule was that it should be everybody should sign, only then that policy will become effective. There's a guy called John who said, I don't want to change. I'm not going to pay this. I don't want to buy this policy. I don't. So everybody tried to, they spent many hours trying to convince him it's a great policy, do it. But he said, no, I don't like it. I'm not going to do it. So finally, the boss called him in and said, John, I believe you don't want to sign the policy. He said, yes, boss, I don't want to sign the policy. He said, you have two choices. You either sign it or you're fired. Which one would you like to? So he said, boss, I'll sign. And he went out and signed the policy. So the other guys were all shocked. He said, we spent so many hours trying to convince you. You didn't get convinced. In 2 minutes, you agreed to the boss. He said, that is the beauty of the boss's communication style. His style is so much better than you guys. So companies, when you are not a good, then arm twisting, because you cannot have everybody agree to this change. It is nice if you can get. Companies work on the premise that if a lot of people agree, it's enough. Most companies believe that if 60% people are for the change, let's do it. We're not going to look for 100% change. So it's never going to happen that you're going to have everybody agreeing to that, because nobody likes change. So it's okay. So now these are the models that are there for change. So we're going to look at that, and we look at, so the Kurt Levin's model of 3-step change is what is one of the models. So these are the two standard models when you're talking about change management. It is used universally. So your company, whoever was there, would have used either this or the John Cotter's model, or use both. So what Levin said is that Levin gave an example of that I'm making ice cubes, but I don't want ice cubes. I want cylinders of ice. So he said, you can't make cylinders of ice by just chipping at the edges. Then I have to unfreeze that, make it into water, put it into a different mold, only then will I get that. So that is what he talked about change. So he says, if you want change, you can't simply say, I'll make a few changes here and make a few changes there and I'm going to get change. No. You have to completely move to a time when it is the old system is completely off, which we call unfreezing, and then move to a new system. And once everybody is moved there, you consolidate, make that the practice, which we call freezing. Okay, so it's actually a very simple thing, very difficult, because lots of actions will happen under the tree. So don't think so simple, I'll go change. But anytime you see this change happening, you find that it cannot happen without this. So you can, what companies usually do is have the old system running, have the new system running, and make a hash of it. The better thing to do is to say, but how do you implement it? It is the old process stops and a new one starts, or and at one point the old system is completely done, and you say tell the people from tomorrow new system. That's about it. So change has to happen. Uh, when you change has to happen, it has to happen like this, that you unfreeze it, then you say, okay, we start having movement where people gradually start implementing that. Depending on the sort of company you are, the pace would depend on the company, how much of management push you have, and then you move to the new system. So that is what the entire Kurt Levin's model of change is. It's a good thing. Kurt Levin was very much impressed by physics. So he said that if why do status quo exist? Because there are certain forces which he called driving forces which drive the company towards change, but there are restraining forces that prevent the change from happening. And when these two forces are in equilibrium, then it is in status quo. So if you want to now move it, you decide how do you increase the power of the driving forces, reduce the power of the restraining forces so that the change can happen. Okay, so that is how things happen. Okay, so now remember till 1980, Indian banks were not computerized. You can't imagine, those of you working in BFSI can't imagine a bank without computerization, but it existed in India in 1980, created a big mess, but that's how it was. Why? Because the biggest problem was that the union said that this will lead to large scale unemployment and large scale job loss. We're not going to allow it. So they had to finally weaken the union thing and bring in changes and ensure that the entire thing happens. Okay, so one of the big things that happened, one of the big changes that was done in a corporate level, there is a very, very famous newspaper that comes out of London called the London Times. I don't know if you have heard of London Times. London Times is headed, is owned by a media mogul called Murdoch. Okay, so Murdoch owns London Times, and London Times had a very highly unionized culture, and no change was happening. So what this fellow did, what Murdoch did was he said, you can't change the newspaper like this by coming up with that. And he said that the biggest problem is the print guys. And the printing was an old fashioned printing. So he said, fine, I'm going to change this entire thing. We are going to move electronic, and we're going to have electronic latest printing, which don't require all these guys who are in the print union. We don't want those guys. So what he did was that he created in secret, nobody in the company knew it. He created an entirely different office and printing facility, did all that in secret. Nobody knew about it. And one day told them we are moving to the new system. Okay, and what he did is that he told them we don't need all of you, so we are going to give you whatever is the thing to the. We are going to give you a little more pay and ask you to leave. So this created a furor. The journalists were not too happy because they had to move from the way it used to work is that they used to write by hand. They had to move to computers. So they're not very happy about it. But they realized what he was trying to do. And in about a month, the entire thing settle down, and the entire movement that you have from the regular print to electronic happened, and the same thing happened in India. The but in India we didn't have to do that. We didn't have to sack people, but people were retrained, and we moved to electronic. But one of the biggest changes that happened in London Times is the whole bunch of people suddenly found themselves without jobs because the entire printing technology changed, and he moved entire thing. So the way it worked now is that there would be a journalist who would type out his report. It would go to an editor, and the editor, sub-editor, who would check the English and put in a title. It would go to the editor, who would say how much of the story I want in the paper. He'll put it there, and it would go to print, and the entire paper would get printed. There was no need for anybody to, put in the old-fashioned. Have you seen the old-fashioned prayer? They have to set that thing and so take out one thing, and somebody had to check it. All this disappeared overnight. So you could have sudden changes happen. It was sad that a lot of people went out of jobs. The bad thing was that they brought it on themselves by unfair demands on Murdoch. They went on strike. They demanded wages which they didn't deserve. So he said, I don't want you at all, as a way of doing it. So he didn't say that, okay, we will have a little thing here and little thing. Complete change. Let's move to a new system and be done with it. So lots of changes have to happen by force. So that is what Kurt Lewin talked about. John Cotter is the other guy. John Cotter actually gave a model on how you actually implement change. So he talked about the 8 steps that he required for going through the change. You can go through that at your leisure, because it is basically a very clear self-explanatory thing on what those steps are and how change is going to happen. Now, how do you manage change? Okay, so these are the things for managing change. The first thing is that you understand through a survey or a feedback mechanism on what do people think about the change. If the people are happy about it, don't bother about it. Implement the change. What are the areas that you're talking about? Then you have a process of consulting with people, saying that, okay, these are the benefits, this is how you're going to benefit. And then, uh, you know, appreciative inquiry is when you talk to individuals, understand what they're going through, and empathize with them to speed up this process of change. This is exactly what happens when you. Sorry. See, what happens is that when you're trying to bring in change, there are different groups who are affected by this change. So what you need to do is to probably they require a little bit more of training. They probably need a little more hand holding. Yeah, not just awareness, but maybe you don't know how to use it. I know the benefit, but how am I going to use it? I may not be clear. So you might want to do that. Okay, so this is what I so just give you an example of that. What happened is in Toyota, when they went to America, Toyota have plants, manufacturing plants in the US. So they were launching a new car every 12 months. The American norm was that the dealers wanted a car every 8 months. So what did Toyota do? They doubled the time they took for planning. So instead of trying to reduce the production time, they increased the time for planning and told them in 8 months we want the car, but you plan better. So the way Toyota system works is that each group, they're shown the car, and each group then decides on what are the issues, problems that they come. Then they again get together. They're saying, okay, fine, what is it that I have a problem with? So the team that is building the car, designing the car, they see if we can work through some of the issues. And this process goes on for many months. Once everybody says we are happy with what you're saying and they sign off on it, the production starts. Once the production starts, if you have a problem, then it's your problem. You have to solve it. No coming back, and this process is not repeated. So that is what is called intergroup development. That You keep talking about change, you keep talking about that. That is, I think, one of the lessons for Indian thing, to actually increase the planning phase so that people can express their opinions, negative points about that encouraged, and therefore you then understand how to actually design and bring in the change. So this is about that. This is how you, okay. This is okay. All this is fine. There is a part about stress which you can read on your own. The part about what causes stress and how do organization cause stress, which you can read on your own. That I'm not covering in this session. Okay. Okay. So now let's look at how do you prepare for your exam. What is it that you do? Okay. So the first chapter is what is organization behavior. Now, in every chapter, definitions are important. Okay, so if I don't tell you, assume that definitions are important. So if you're talking about what is OB, uh, Henry Mintzberg's model of management, all the roles of a management, and how do various other sciences, other subjects, how have they contributed to organization? How has psychology contributed to organization development? How has sociology, anthropology? That is important. Okay, so that is what is important uh, in level 1. In the second one is about, the second chapter is about diversity. Okay, so what is diversity? Why is diversity important to a company? What is, okay, so take your time. If I'm going too fast, stop me. Okay, okay, so what is diversity? Why is it important? What is surface level, deep level diversity? Difference between the two? Yeah. So where are you? From where do you want me to repeat? What is diversity? Why is diversity important for a company? What is surface and deep level diversity? And what is diversity management?
Sir, what did you say now? Last one.
What is diversity management?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The third one is on attitude. What is attitude? Emotions and moods. What is the difference between emotion and mood? How does emotion and mood affect job satisfaction? Emotions and mood. How does it affect? What is job satisfaction? How does these affect job satisfaction? That is about attitude. Now, what is personality? And in personality, MBTI, Big Five, important. What is personality? Big Five model of measuring personality, and MBTI, that is important. What are these? Understanding that, how do you measure? What are the dimensions? All that in important in personality. After that is motivation. In personality, there are two tests. One is MBTI, the other one is Big Five. The next one is motivation. What is motivation? and the theories of motivation are all important. Maslow, Hertzberg, McLennan, Bandura, all important. What is motivation? Motivation theories, Maslow, Hertzberg, McLennan needs theory, and Bandura's. Bandura's is also called social efficacy model. Done? Okay. Okay. You need to, yeah. First one in first chapter. What is OB?
Organizational behavior.
Yes. No. I'm somebody wanted me to repeat, so I'm repeating. I'm not asking you a question. Okay. Yeah. You want the other questions too, or what is? There is a Henry Mintzberg. He's told what are the roles of a manager. That's important. Yes, absolutely. Decisional, all those, the various things, that's important. The third thing is how do various other subjects contribute to organization behavior? So how does psychology, sociology, anthropology have all these contributed to organization behavior? Okay. We were in motivation. Any other chapter or? Okay, motivation application is the next chapter. Sorry? Yeah. So in that you have the JCM model, job characteristics model. So that is important. There's a JCM model that is there. Look at the PPT. There is a, then it tells you about how to motivate, what are the various steps, job rotation. Each of them are important. What is job rotation? What is job enrichment? What are the differences between them? All of them are important. Okay, and what are the various methods to motivate? There is a piece rate method, and there is other methods that have been merit-based pay, ESOP. All those methods are important.
Sir, I am able to see stress at work in my screen, and what you are saying, I'm not able to relate it.
Yeah. So you can hear the recording later. I'm talking about what are the important portions for the exam.
Okay.
Okay. So this is nothing to do with stress at work. Okay. You can ask your other colleagues. They are noting it down. I'm sure they'll be able to send it to you in your class. Okay. I would request somebody who's made a neat note of it, please pass it on to your other classmates too. Okay.
Sure, sir.
After motivation applications, we have groups, we have teams. Okay, groups. Difference between groups and teams important. What are group norms? How are norms used? And how are they used? How are they used? Then you have What is social loafing? What is the concept of social loafing? How do you handle that? Then we have teams. What are teams? I've already told about difference between groups and teams. So what are the different types of teams that are there? What is a work group? What is a work team? Now, different types of teams. And there is that part about what are the characteristics of high performing teams. Okay, so what are all that? You need to be sure of that. Okay, now after groups and teams, you have leadership. So what is leadership? Leadership theories. So you have the various theories of leadership. You have starting with the Ohio studies. So Ohio study, Blake Moulton, Fiedler contingency model. What else is there? Situational. So all those are important. Ohio study, Blake Moulton model, Fiedler's contingency, and situational leadership. I don't know if I have met. All the models are important for leadership. Fine. Then we have after leadership, what do we have? We have you have organization culture. So in organization culture, what is organization culture? What are the dimensions of organization culture? What are the various types of what causes an organization to have? If I want an organization culture, what are the various things? That is important. So when you're talking about organization culture, what are the various things that the dimensions of organization culture? What are the various dimensions of organization culture? And then I missed one. Organization culture. What is it I miss? Okay, I'll look at what I've missed. What we did today, we did organization structure. How does an organize? There are dimensions that create an organization structure. That what is a matrix organization? Various way of departmentalization. Slow. Various ways of structure. How are departments formed? What is a matrix organization? And what are the factors that decide the structure of an organization? Okay. Then we have what do we have after that? We have conflict. What is conflict? What are the different types of conflict? And the modes of handling conflict. And Then we did change. What is change? What is change management? What is Kurt Levin's model? And what is John Cotter's model? In the first chapter, I think there is a concept of evidence-based management, which is basically of use of facts, figures to take management decisions rather than based on perceptions and our own opinions about things. Okay, so that's another thing that's important. That's in the first chapter, yes. Okay. First chapter, what is organization? And the John Cotter's model. Sorry? What is evidence-based management? EBM, what is evidence-based? Chapter 1. So let me just check if I've missed out a chapter. I think I forgot one chapter. Motivation, organization change, organization structure, personality, what is OB, work teams. I think I have covered everything. Diversity, attitude, job satisfaction, conflict. Okay, I have combined emotion, moods into and attitude, job satisfaction into one. Okay, so again, yeah, in again definition is important. Okay, so now the all the whatever the case study is, the case study will be related to OB. And so try to see how you can use some of the knowledge you have in solving the OB case. So it will not be something out of the blue. It might also ask you to do something which is very specific. It can ask you to use a motivation model to explain some of the things. It could ask you to use a leadership model to explain a certain thing. Even that is possible. So you could, I could make it easy for you and say, okay, use this and do it. Or it could be something that is broad, where there's a question asked on how you can improve something or what were the reasons, and then you just give the reasons for whatever is the point. The case would usually be about a page, maybe less, a little more. You have to write the points asked in the question. So if you write irrelevant things which are not there, it will not get you more marks. So even in the short answers, if you write 2 lines, that doesn't suffice. The question would usually be, we would expect about half a page normal writing in the first thing, about 1 to 1.5 pages in this for the second section, and relevant pages for the third. Yeah, it is a lot of writing. It is a lot of writing. Yeah, more examples are better. Most questions would ask you to give you examples. In fact, if you are basically in your own words covering the concept even of definition, that's good enough. If you want to give the textbook, even that is fine, whatever you're comfortable with. But if you're giving something out of the way, then that would become difficult. Okay. Yeah, so there's groups. Yeah, that is groups. They are also called work teams. So that is what it is. Emotion and moods, attitude are combined it, but they are 2 different chapters. Okay. Okay, so all the best, do well. Okay. Anything specific you would like me to cover now, I'm happy to do that. If you want me to, I don't know when your exam is. So, okay, 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 June 19th. I don't know if see, if you want some clarification, please feel free to reach out to me. If I don't respond immediately, it would be because I'm in a class like this. So I don't know if I would be teaching something else on that day. But otherwise, you are free to ask me if you have any doubts or clarification. Now, the standard textbook that we use is Stephen Robbins. That is from where the PPTs have been taken. The PPTs have been uploaded on LMS. I'll check it again on Monday whether all of them are there. So you can use that to understand and to answer. But if you feel that I can't understand a part of it, please get back to me and I'll be happy to. Okay. Only if you, on the day before the exam, if you send this one late in the night, I might not reply. Right? So otherwise, I try to respond as quickly as possible. Okay. Okay. Now a request. The people who have been online may not have noted down. So please help them out by sending that to them so that they can also help prepare. Okay, so that's all from my side. Have a nice day and see you sometime later. Okay, do well in the exam. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.